Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today is Monday, October 23rd, 2023. We're here in the County Commissioners Conference Room at our Larimer County Administrative Services in Fort Collins. And we are here for a work session today for performance measures for support services. And so I just introduced myself. I'm Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shabbat-McNally, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners, joined at the conference table by my colleagues, Larimer County Commissioner Kristen Stevens, Larimer County Commissioner John Kafalis. And again, we welcome you for joining us today. We also have our County Manager, Lorendo Volker, who is at the table, and off to the side is our Assistant County Manager, Lori Kadrich. So I will turn this over to Matthew Bahunin, our budget man.
Team lead.
Team lead.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm going to get that down. It's different. I'll let you go ahead. We have a lot of very important folks at the table today. So Matthew, instead of going through all the introductions, I'm just going to turn it over to you since we started a couple minutes early, and let us roll. Thank you.
Okay. I'll just give a brief history of the performance measure program at Larimer County. This is actually my last time coordinating this work session. We're turning it over to Julie Elser, our data program manager, to take it to the next level. The reason the budget office has been coordinating performance measures is we would report them in the budget book. So it was text, table, and there was no graphics or visualizations. And so a few years ago, we pulled it out of the budget book. We started having these work sessions. We're going to do 5 a year for every service category, and then each department has their own. We created graphics, we put them online, and we are presenting them today to you and the public. And so each department director will review their own measures. And if you have any questions or feedback or suggestions on things to improve on, we can take those notes and take this to the next level. Next year, we'll hopefully record these in a data catalog with analytics and continuous improvement, as Josh mentioned in the strategic plan. So I'll turn it over to our county attorney.
Good morning, Commissioners. Bill Rasu, Larimer County Attorney. My 2 measures are up on the screen, and they're both focused on efficiency of legal services. The first measure, which is on the left side, it looks at the attorneys per capita compared to similar populated counties. And in Larimer, which is in green, we have 1 attorney for approximately every 45,000 people who live in our county. Weld County, which is on the right in red, they have approximately 1 county attorney for every 38,000 people. Boulder County in blue, 1 county attorney per 16,000 people in Boulder County. And then Arapahoe County, which actually from a population perspective is much larger than the other 3. I included them as a measure to give the board a sense of what the largest county's ratio would look like, so it gives you some perspective. And this year, Arapahoe is at 1 county attorney per 26,000 people in Arapahoe County. Next year, we will be capturing a new attorney that we hired this year, since we're looking at 2022 data. And so we'll see a decrease. The Larimer ratio will still be, I expect, elevated above our counterparts, but it's going to be closer to Weld's. With a variable in a single digit, when we move from 8 attorneys to 9, it has a pretty drastic change. So I do expect that will fall for next year. The second measure is on the right, and that looks at the ratio of attorneys per full-time county employee in comparison, again, to the same comparable counties. So in Larimer County for this year, for every 249 county employees, we have 1 county attorney. Weld County, the ratio is for every 201, they have 1 county attorney. Boulder County, 116 to 1, and Arapahoe County, 109 to 1. With respect to our counterparts, the attorney numbers for Weld, Boulder, and Arapahoe stayed relatively unchanged from 2021 to 2022, with the exception of Arapahoe County. They added 3 attorneys in 2022. So it'll be interesting to see next year if Boulder County or Weld County grow. As I mentioned, we're going to grow next year on this chart. We'll show as 9 attorneys instead of instead of 8. So as I've said in prior years, we strive to operate efficiently. We've always had a relatively small and efficient attorney staff in comparison to our counterparts. And that's in large part been due to the other county departments really knowing their stuff. You know, they know what they're doing, they do it well, and so their need for our services doesn't come up as much as it might in other counties. I don't know that for sure, but that's my assumption. And I believe that's why we've been able to operate really efficiently. But at the same time, I recognize that we need to make a fine balance between efficiency and providing quality services and meeting the needs of the legal demand. That's why we added another attorney. And while we resist growing, we will do so if we need to. But we're going to really wait until we see a pattern. In our area, we can get spikes throughout the year where we're swamped and then it calms down, and then a period of time where we're swamped again and it calms down. So we're really trying to watch to see a consistent pattern develop before we ask for more help. So with that, are there any questions for me?
Commissioner Stevens and then Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yeah, just a question. I may have asked this in previous iterations of this, but do we do more, bring in more outside consultants than some of these other counties? And that may be a more efficient way to operate, is having, people who are experts in a certain area do some of that work without kind of keeping them on staff just in case we have a civil rights case or something like that. So if you could speak to that.
It's a little bit of a mixture. So Weld County, they use outside attorneys for appeal work on their dependency and neglect cases. We handle those in-house. Weld County uses outside counsel for child support cases, and we handle those in-house. And then Weld County uses outside counsel for adult protection, which we also handle in-house. Other than that, I believe Weld County, like we do, tends to use outside counsel for the occasional civil rights lawsuits that we have. Boulder County tends to manage even their civil rights cases in-house, so they don't use much outside counsel for that, which is a reason why their ratios are what they are, is they have a much larger staff. It's more than double ours, with a population that's slightly smaller. Arapahoe County, I believe they also handle the majority of their civil rights cases in-house. David, do you know of anything in particular that Arapahoe farms out?
That Arapahoe farms out, no. I do know that Arapahoe and Jeffco, that's not up there, tend to do this. They do have in-house counsel for civil rights, but they will also farm some out depending on their workload. But they're so much larger that they tend to have more cases. And then as the number of cases increases to fully sustain another attorney and paralegal, they bring it in-house. So they keep doing this, and we haven't quite gotten there.
Fortunately, yeah.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Bill. My understanding is that in your office, there are sort of general purpose attorneys, and then there are those who are focused on child welfare and human services kinds of activities. Maybe could you briefly expand on that? And related to that, are you seeing any trends that might be contributing to, unsustainable workloads and that kind of thing? For example, CORA, are we getting more CORA requests, and is that contributing to workloads that maybe in the future might not be as sustainable?
So currently, of the 9 attorneys that we have in the office, we're split pretty much right down the middle, about 50-50, between the attorneys that do human services work and the attorneys that do everything except human services work. Prior to hiring our new attorney this year, it was a bit more of a skewed ratio, and so now we're just about even. As far as trends, we are seeing increasing workloads. That's what caused us to feel a need to add this extra attorney. It's not from one particular area necessarily. I think it's the overall addition of new laws that trigger requirements on the county. So you have changes to how the Open Records Act is worded and additional obligations on the county for that. And then also with respect to some brand new things like, it just slipped my mind. Unionization. So as those things pop up, they're brand new in concept, and so we do expect that as those things roll out, it'll increase.
Thank you.
So I had a quick question. We have 9 attorneys, which I think I've met all of them. I know you guys work really hard and you're indispensable and valuable team. And I'm wondering, would we compare with our office to other offices like paralegals and other things underneath? Because sometimes if you have really strong support staff, that helps the attorneys that we already have. Is that something you've looked at or we compare? Because sometimes I wonder if that's also kind of, if they have a lot, I'm sure they have a lot of attorneys, they have some support staff underneath, but do they have larger support staff compared to us? And how does that look? Do you know?
I haven't looked specifically at that. My impression is that it would be a relatively similar ratio, but we could look at that next year. I think that would be a good thing to consider. We have a total of 19 staff, so in addition to the 9 attorneys, we have 6 paralegals, and we have 3 others. One is a business or kind of an office manager position, and then we have 2 general assistants that do kind of whatever. They help out in all areas. So for next year, when we ask of our counterparts for their attorney count, I think it would be a great idea to also ask for the other staff they have in their office. We get a sense of the total office size.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Next, we have facilities.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ken Cooper with the Facilities Team. We can rattle through a lot of these pretty quickly, I think, but we haven't done a new survey yet because we do those typically every about 16 months. So we'll have one for our customers to be able to give their feedback on our overall service levels and, more specific to that across each of the groups that, that we manage. But the last time we went through it was our high water mark. We actually got to, our goal is to get 90+% to say that our overall service level is either good or excellent, and there's only 4, so you got to go either poor, fair, good, or excellent. And the other good news on that, that's the highest we've gotten, and the other good news is that almost 60% said excellent, so we were really pleased with that. That was a considerable upgrade too. We thought that it was very helpful. A lot of times people will come into a restroom and then fill out a survey, and depending upon what the condition of that restroom is, that's what they're going to give you a grade for. And we've seen a really significant leap in that with the folks that we have with ARC, the contractor, and certainly the support staff that we manage as well. So that felt like a pretty key piece to to why those numbers were continuing to grow. So we're real happy with that. The percent of the preventive maintenance performed, within the guidelines that manufacturers call out, we're holding steady with that as well. We feel good about that. Those are basically, pre-scheduled pieces, not reactive maintenance, but across the 1.5 million square feet, that's an awful lot of good work by our team, to tackle things on a regular basis, filters and just typical maintenance for mechanical systems and things like that. So we feel good about that one. The next one is, at least on a sheet here, is increased operating cost for the buildings overall. And we've seen that increase a little more than we had. But when you put it in the context of what that can look like from, again, for 2022, that was, approaching 5%. Our goal is to stay below that, so we did that. But if you compare that to where the industry is, particularly on the construction side, we've seen escalation. You've heard me mention it many, many times. Escalation, north of 20%, which is unheard of. And so that obviously impacts some of this. These are including, kind of the day-to-day and kind of onesie-twosie type projects that our team tackles. And so that, we're doing our darndest to stay low. So you have a question, Commissioner?
Yeah, if I might, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know you're on a roll. I'm curious, we have had we've had to increase security at some buildings due to, some safety concerns, and I'm wondering if that is adding to that cost at this time with having to increase some security.
Yes,
force.
thank you. I'm glad you mentioned it. We were able to actually increase the security one more time this year and kind of absorb that. So yeah, that does impact the dollars, across our entire department. So, and we're looking at 22 figures, so this will likely, pretty closely track for 23 as well by the time we're done. But we added a security guard at the Midpoint campus recently. There were you'll recall, I think when the board has approved, specific increases in that, we have reporting coming from police and from internal, staff and so on that show a number of incidents, and Midpoint was one that we had seen a pretty heavy dose of increase. And now that folks are, getting back into the workplace for the most part, that was kind of the impetus for making that track. So thank you. The maintenance FTEs, we still look good there. In fact, we look almost better than we should. It's a little bit misleading because the square footages have caught up. The staffing, you might recall, you approved some positions earlier in the year to support the buildings. The behavioral health that's coming on board basically is online now, and then of course the jail expansion and alternative sentencing as well. The county does a terrific job when the budgetary pieces are being put together on a capital project. There's always the trigger that also allows for the support dollars to make sure the buildings are viable, and it's a much, obviously that's a much bigger number. $7.50 doesn't that's not all staff, right? That's all of it. It includes security, to your point earlier, Commissioner, but it's got utilities in there and insurance and things like that all roll up into that number, and gives us flexibility, actually, depending upon where we are, from a service level, and sometimes from a campus level. When you have a brand-new campus like behavioral health, that's a little tougher. We don't have any economy out of that. Other buildings, we, sometimes get some economy, Midpoint, things like that. So those figures are tracking well, and in next year's numbers, you'll see some increase on the FTE side that'll reduce that back a little bit. So make it a little more comparable. But if you compare to what the IFMA, that's International Facility Management Association, we're a fraction of what they typically track. And we, I think this fits to your question earlier, Commissioner, about outside staff, right? We do an awful lot, augmenting our group with contracted services, much more efficient. You're not sort of, saving up on a staffing level for Easter Sunday kind of thing. And so it works well, gives you flexibility, gives you a ton of flexibility when, in tougher times, when those hit again. In terms of reducing back, it's much easier to do that, at a contractor level than it would be to have, reduction in force. So let's see. The last two that we haven't talked about are more related to the energy side of things, and that's been a bit of a slog, I'll be honest with you. The Climate-Wise program, we continue to track on that, even though that program basically has been disbanded, but they have a similar path, and we still report back sort of internally to watch that. So we're still operating at a real good number, and would be on the platinum side and will be again this year, although the program no longer is official. So that's good news. The actual reporting side, twofold, is why we don't have, it's sort of an incomplete grade right now. The state took much longer, has taken quite a bit longer to establish some of these things, from a reporting structure. And we've also had some challenges where, our goal, and I think you've heard me say this, the goal is to have it so that facilities pays the bills. And several years ago, when the county went through the reallocation process, Matt kind of led us through that, and Josh, to determine, cost per square foot, by department, things like that. It was set up so that all the utilities would run through facilities because you have some buying power and there's efficiencies in doing that. And so we want to be able to pay those bills and then have an outside agency be able to report back to us and say, here's some trends to follow and so on. And Brightly seems like the best fit for that. It hasn't worked out that way. We're still optimistic, and we have some new folks that are representing them now. And Kaylee, who runs most of that for our team in facilities, She had 3 meetings in the last few days that she called a 10 out of 10 in terms of what she thinks is going to be changing. And so we're real hopeful again that very soon, 60 days, we'll have the ability to, to pay those bills and then have us be able to hear back from Brightly to say, here's, have you seen this? Have you seen this in terms of the tracking of these energy consumption reporting and make decisions based on that. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but I think we're close. And so they actually gave us 4 months of free rent because of not getting it. And so they've been trying, and, we were wondering if we were enough of a big enough organization, quite honestly, because they serve a lot of big groups, a lot of big public and private side organizations. But we do still have optimism that we'll get over the hurdle. Heidi Pruis and Abby from her team have been terrific about being patient, but understanding that we're really trying. And so I do have one quick update on the energy side. You'll recall that the renewable energy piece that we considered for the Fleet campus with solar, you remember this, we determined that it would make sense to wait on that. For the new building that we're, tracking for emergency services for the sheriff's office, we're closing on that property, you recall, north of 287 at the end of this month. And once we get into the full-blown design and so on, we have a mechanism in place that's going to allow for a comparable, as best we can do it, sort of apples-to-apples comp for whether we do full-blown electrification for that project or whether we go standard. We'll try to report back as accurately as we can, both on the front-end capital to produce either one of those paths, and then almost more importantly, what the back-end operational costs would be like. And so we'll hope to have something for you folks probably the end of the first quarter of '24, and be able to track that as a component of our normal, design process. We've added some things into the RFP for that project, to make sure that we get as close as we can to, side-by-side comparison. So, and I think that's all I've got to report. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Great, great as always. Any questions? Otherwise, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. Mostly just some little bit of positive feedback. One is I appreciate all the landscaping that we're doing here at the county building. I'm presuming that as we get more into this, we'll be able to track, energy saved, but also hopefully money saved. But I just wanted to give you that feedback, and
Thank you.
And I love it that there are roses blooming, and I try when I can to stop and smell the roses because that's important. Also appreciate that our water fountains, we updated the water fountains to include ways to replenish or refill one's water bottle. And then it's a silly thing, a minor thing, but I appreciate that you deployed a recycling container on the first floor by the pop machine.
Right.
So thank you. And Newland and some of those folks, the facilities folks are always so kind and gracious that you should please share that with them, that we certainly, I think, we all appreciate that.
Thank you. I'll be sure to do that. Thanks.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, they're always smiling and excited to see you. And I have to say, I was in another government-owned building over the weekend to do some business, and I was like, reminded me how grateful I am for the work that you do. Our buildings certainly do not look their age. In this building, it literally was missing pieces of tile and falling apart, and it was very much appreciated. Your program, how you manage all this is phenomenal, and certainly grateful and very proud of the condition of our facilities and how they're run. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, the only follow-up comment to that is that a lot of that preceded, my involvement, right? The county has done a terrific job, establishing the component replacement plan specifically, and allowing and reinvesting in its buildings. They've done a terrific job of that for decades. And so that's we're all recipients of the good piece to that. Because if you get behind the 8 ball on that, we've talked about this many times, it's hard to qualify it necessarily, but boy, is it a big wall to hurdle over if you don't get in front of it. And the county's done a very good job, better part of 2 decades to have that rolled into it as a typical budget number. So special thanks to the budget office for that. Like I said earlier on the new building space, it's not quite auto, but it nearly is in terms of getting those dollars rolled in and having that be a systematic way to approach it. So thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ken. Great report. Okay, Matthew?
So we'll do a little line change, hockey change. Everybody in, everybody out with directors. And we'll have finance next.
That's right.
Women, not girls. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Carol Block, and I have the pleasure of serving as the county's Finance Director. Finance has 4 performance measures. The first one is over to the left-hand side, and that is, did the county financial statements receive a favorable audit opinion? And the answer for 2022 was yes. And this is an important measure because it speaks to the county's transparency and stewardship over its funds. And also, from a practical matter, if we don't get a favorable audit opinion, there's a lot of revenue that we can't have, we can't collect, and also we would have trouble borrowing money. So it's got a practical application. And then the county goes a little bit beyond that favorable audit opinion. We also send our financial statements to the Government Finance Officers of America. And as you will probably remember, we received a certificate from them for the 40th year in a row this year. So our next 2 performance measures are on the top, and they deal with purchasing. So the one that says estimated savings through the purchasing office, this is a rough measure of the value of doing formal bids and advertising those bids and getting competition for those bids. So what you see there, those dollar amounts are the difference between the low bid and the high bid. So for 2022, that difference was $5.9 million. And this graph is not, it's never going to be any sort of a linear thing because that difference depends on what type of projects we're bidding out in a particular year and also on how much competition we have. And after COVID, we saw a pretty significant drop in the number of vendors that respond to our bids and proposals. That's starting to come up a little bit, but there still is a lack of competition for a lot of the things that we do bid out, and hopefully that will improve. The next graph to the right shows the number of bids, quotes, and RFPs that the county has formally advertised over the past year. So for 22, there were 35 bids and quotes, and I think that's probably about 31 RFPs. And the reason this is important is it shows the community how many opportunities there are to engage with the county to provide goods and services. And again, this will just go up and down depending on the number of projects we have in any given year. So the last measure is the one on the bottom, and that's workers' comp cost savings compared to industry benchmark. And of course, if an employee is injured on the job, the county has the responsibility to cover their medical costs as well as their wages when they can't work. And the black line is the average for our industry. So if we're below that line, that means our costs are a little bit higher than industry standard. If we're above that line, that means it's a cost savings. So for 2023, our cost savings was about 30% compared to the industry standard for local government. So, are there any questions about any of this?
Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, just what do we attribute the lower number of bids to? Is it COVID related? Is it related to, some economic factors?
In 21 or?
Well, yeah, Yeah, you said that there have been previously a lack of competition in the
Oh,
so
so you mean
the responses, I guess, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
yeah, there seems to be a lot of business out there, and companies have difficulty getting employees, and also they have supply chain issues. So just the same things that you hear about in your personal life, the county also is dealing with those with their vendors.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Did you have a question, sir?
Sure. Regarding the estimated savings through purchasing office, what other criteria do we consider? What are some of the main ones that we consider when we're making a decision on a bid or a proposal? I mean, besides cost.
This particular measure that we're showing there is bids, and bids are based on low cost. We also have RFPs, and those are based on a lot of factors, like the experience of the vendor. There's some climate-wise type criteria. There's a whole bunch of things that go into an RFP, but the bids are based on price.
Great. One more question. Thank you for clarifying that, Carol. Regarding workers' comp, 31% above the industry benchmark, that's a good thing.
Yes.
What are some of the reasons for that, for achieving that? That's great.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, and we have an actuary that looks at our program, and they also look at a lot of programs that public employers run for workers' comp. And this past year, they commented that we really do a good job of getting our claims resolved and closed and our people back to work. We're much more efficient at that than a lot of entities. That was something that really stood out for them about our program.
Thank you, Carol, and I just want to again compliment you and your team for 40 years of these clean audits and exemplary, kudos from an independent agency, and I just want to say it's outstanding. I don't know of any organization that has that, so just wanted to compliment you again and your team on that honor and that award, and I'm really grateful to see these numbers, and it's all due to a lot of work that you guys do behind the scenes that I know takes a lot of special care and focus and diligence, so I just want to express my gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to Fleet.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Heidi Vilhauer, Director of Fleet Services. So I'll go through the metrics. The first one being the CO2 emissions. So recently, we did a full countywide greenhouse gas inventory, which Heidi Pruis did a great job leading. So this is a little misleading. We used a number that our system calculated. However, going forward, we'll use her, the new metric. So it was at 5,500 for 2022 when they calculated it, which I would have expected it to be different. We were using fleet software to calculate, which wasn't probably as accurate. So that the good news is that we are seeing that number decreasing year over year. And again, just as we get newer fleet in, they're more economic, more fuel efficient. And so then we'll move over to the fleet utilization and then the machine hours. So what's interesting is you do see a decrease from 2021 to 2022. And it kind of goes in line with what Carol is saying. It's resources. I think we didn't have the people in place to be out driving the vehicles. And then in some cases, we didn't have the vehicles in place when we had employees. So that's just a kind of a falling out of that. But I think, again, we'll see increases in 2023 now that we're getting more vehicles back on the road and more employees back in for sure. It seems like the sheriff's office is getting to be fully staffed, and then potentially new ads is what we're seeing. And then, so down in the left-hand corner with the vehicles and equipment per technician, we're just, staying steady right at that 108. So we have 1,000 units, a little over 1,000 units, right at $80 million of replacement cost. And we have 10 technicians, maintenance technicians, 2 parts technicians, and 1 fabricator. We need a fabricator because he does really all the welding for the beat-up plows and all that kind of stuff. So he's great to have on staff. So that's actually not even a true reflection of technicians. And the neat thing about our techs is they fix everything from the shredder at the landfill, compactors, down to trash pumps to pump water out of culverts for road and bridge. So we have a wide variety of fleet. Our techs are well-trained and they can fix just about anything. So they're passionate about it, and it's a good job for them. And then so fleet, the fuel consumption. So the county consumed 648,000 gallons of fuel, and we dispensed 800,000 gallons of fuel. 150,000 went to other partners that we partner with, primarily Poudre school districts, because they're redoing their fuel pump. And so they gave us a lot of business in 2022, and even some in 2023. So, but we are starting to see a decline. That'll be unfortunate because, it's good we get some revenue off of that a little bit. And that little bit of revenue that we get is to, as Ken had mentioned, the program to replace and keep our fuel sites current and up to date. So the county has 11 fuel sites. In 2022, we replaced the Stove Prairie fuel site, which turned out really nice. And then we also updated some of the pumps and technology at Waverly, including a DEF system, so we could get away from the 2.5-gallon buckets or containers. And so that's been good. And then as far as work orders go, so we are increasing work orders. The good news is our preventative maintenance is also increasing. So we went up from 2021 to 2022 about 2%. So it's slow and steady, but that, really when I look at the mileage, when you're driving 5 million miles, that's 1,000 oil changes, just oil changes. That's a APM, and we do a lot of different kinds of, preventative maintenance at 5,000, at 20,000, at 50,000. And then same on the equipment, where we service some of that at the landfill at 100 hours, primarily at 250. So again, that's a lot of services that we're running through the shop, just preventative. So that's good news. And that is fleet.
Thank you for that great presentation, some great numbers. I'll see if my colleagues have some questions. Commissioner Gonzalez?
Thank you. Matthew, are we good with time?
We have 2 more departments to go after this, so I think we're on track, yeah.
Okay, then maybe in the interest of compromise, I'll only ask one of my 2 questions. Perhaps we could follow up. And that is this. Recently, I went on a ambulance ride-along with UC Health, which was very enlightening, to say the least. And one of the things they talked about, they don't turn off their ambulances for obvious reasons, which became more obvious to me after the ride-along. But they referenced something called clean idle. And some of their ambulances run on diesel, some on regular gas, and some on natural gas. But what is clean idle, Heidi, and do we do that, or do we have the ability to do that? That's my question. There were really 2 in there, I guess.
I'm not sure what they're referring to as clean idle, but I have a great resource over there that I'm going to just touch base on to see what they're referring to
Yeah,
specifically.
I'm curious, if I may, because a lot of, like our deputies, they generally have to keep their vehicles on for the most part. So I'm curious about what this clean idle is, and if maybe there's something to be learned from there.
So I can answer a little bit of that, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens and I went and did a tour of their bus barn in Windsor and learned a lot. And I'm glad you rode along on an ambulance. I've done that a lot. That was back when I used to ride along. But it's and Commissioner Stevens, if I miss a piece, please help me fill in the details. But it's not all of them, but a lot of their newer buses and ambulances, they call them buses, have a battery and a system so they don't have to run when they're sitting in a parking lot. They have a strategic way of placing them where they think they have data for where they know at certain times of the day or certain days of the week they're going to see more in this area. So they'll have that ambulance and that crew go sit, and they, instead of running it for 12 hours, so really those ambulances are running like 12 hours straight, but they can go ahead and turn it off, but they have a special battery or a converter that keeps the equipment charged, and so that when they go ahead and need to start and roll, the equipment's not drained down, and that they're pretty much, because at times they have to keep that rolling so that the equipment is charged and ready to roll. And so they have this new converter or whatever it is to keep it charging, but that they don't have to have like actually the bus rolling with like the gas running. So it's saving them some fuel, and also I forgot the number, but they have decreased already their greenhouse emissions by 30%. It was quite a substantial number, and it was saving them wear and tear on the ambulances, because they don't maybe drive as many miles, but they have the operating hours are what it is, because they may not drive because they're sitting there, but it was significant. So and I forgot his name up there, the director. He was very informative about that. He could probably call him director, and I'm trying to remember his name, but he was. I have his name in my card. My husband knows him. So, but that's what it is, and so it has a lot of win-wins for everyone. So I know they're looking to expand it.
That sounds like it could be a potential for the canine units specifically, as one that they run for hours and hours a day. So that an inverter, I think is what they're called. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Stevens says, did I think I had that correct? Do you have anything
Yeah,
else?
I can't remember more of the details. I may have notes somewhere else on it, but it seemed like it might be something we want to look into. Their cost, at least, I think, was about $10,000 per vehicle, but I wonder if groups like the RAC or other groups might be able to, have grant opportunities to be able to do that. And I think they actually did get some grant opportunities to include that in some of their vehicles.
Yeah, they did. Thank you for remembering that. So, okay. And there's opportunity with that right now. Thank you, Heidi.
Okay, now we'll do human resources.
Almost forgot. Good morning. My name is Bridget Paris. I'm the HR director for Larimer County. I'm actually going to start opposite on the slide, just to change it up for you. I'm going to start at the employee survey and the responses that Larimer County is a great place to work. In 2019, if you'll remember, we switched our employee survey tool. So you'll see in the green bar, that's we agree that Larimer County is a great place to work. And then the yellow is a neutral response. So it was an either we disagree or not. It wasn't we agree or disagree. It was just a neutral response. So that's that change. This year, I do want to note we did go up 1% to 87% that Larimer County is a great place to work. That's an increase from last year. And I also want to note that when we do the employee survey, we group all of the questions by our guiding principles. And this last year, we saw the same or increased agreement response in every guiding principle category. So that's a big win for us when we're looking across the board at each of our guiding principles. So still making positive headway in terms of the employee survey. We make sure that we share those results and that department heads are able to engage and see managers with 5 responses or more get to see their results. We go through every single comment that's given in the employee survey and make sure that we address any that require follow-up. So kudos to our department heads, to our managers for engaging in the survey, for encouraging employees to respond, and for making changes, taking action, and following up. I think that's the biggest difference in the survey, and that gets us the results we do. We see a really high response rate in our employee survey. 71% participation is huge. We saw an increase this year. That's not normal for survey participation. So kudos again to leaders for making it a valid feedback tool for employees. I'm going to head to the left and talk about health insurance increase on the bottom. We had a health insurance increase by 3% in 2022. Average health insurance increases are usually right at that 9%, which is why we want to be less than that 9%. As you can see, we do that. We do that through a variety of different ways. We really work hard to mitigate costs, keeping in mind that with health insurance, it's actually more like a 95-5 rule, while 5% of our costs for health insurance come from 95% of our population, right? The bulk of our large health insurance cost comes from a small population of high claims costs. So we're working really hard to do that. We have a cancer partnership program with MD Anderson with Banner happening next year, so we're super excited about that, trying to get the best coordinated, cost-effective service for cancer treatment. They tend to be our high-cost opportunity for us. Plus, we look at all the small programs. Jennifer put a lot of work into CPAP programs, sleep apnea, and different strategies, trends that we see. So we really watch all pieces of the program, but because of the management and the extra benefits, the marketing, the engagement, we're able to keep those increases low. Still, we do have quite a few really high claims. When we went out to bid this year for stop loss, no one would bid us. So we had to make adjustments to our plans. We'll have some increased cost to the plan there, and we'll continue to watch that. So that stop loss is those high claims. Continuing to work in that area will be important. Average time from job posting to opening offer, we're down to 42. I've had consistent staffing in our recruiting. That makes a big difference. We know our departments, we know our hiring managers. In many cases, we've done the recruitment before, and we can really help them along the process, because the biggest chunk of that number is the hiring process, is the hiring manager engaging with candidates, interviewing, selecting, making those offers. So that's a good number. I'm not sure we'll get much lower than that, but I'm pretty happy with it right at the 42. Cost of overtime as a percentage of earnings. I like to highlight overtime because overtime means there's a gap in service. There's a gap in people, and we have other people performing the service to cover that work, which is causing the overtime. It also means sometimes we have an emergency and we have to roll out additional staffing. Those are the two big indicators of overtime, that we are covering hours or we're responding to an emergency.
Thank you, Bridget. Excellent presentation and great news. So I had one quick question. So anybody else have any other questions? Commissioner Kafalis.
Thank you. Thank you, Bridget, HR Director. My question is, I suppose it's two-part. One is, in terms of our increased healthcare costs, are we able to determine how much of that is attributable to folks receiving out-of-network healthcare services? And related to that, what is it called the Blue Book that we get that tells us where we, to be good consumers? Could you speak to how well employees are using the Blue Book, to find the best option? And then also out-of-network costs, how does that contribute to that 3% or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of out-of-network costs. Most of our providers locally here, of course, are all in our network. There are times when a specialist might be an out-of-network referral. So I would say out-of-network is a pretty small impact. We don't see that a lot. Healthcare Blue Book is an amazing tool as long as you're able to essentially intervene in terms of a referral or a choice where you go. A lot of times employees will see their primary care, and the primary care will make a referral for an x-ray, for a specialist. And so if the primary care makes that referral, it's typically within their network, right? And so as an employee, we would need to stop and say, hey, you know what? I know you're sending me to location A to get my x-ray, to get my scan, to get whatever specialist treatment, but I'm going to take a look and see what my choices are to see what that impact is. Because primary care or providers don't necessarily know cost of other providers, right? They're just referring to somebody that they're aware of, that they've worked with, and that they have experience on. So we're doing a good job. The incentives for employees are making a difference. We get a lot of phone calls that say, was I supposed to get that check? Right? Which is super fun, because when you do pick the green provider in certain situations, you can get a check in the mail. But we'll continue to market. That's another strategy where we keep our costs low, is the use of Healthcare Blue Book and the employees understanding that they have a choice for care. It is not solely based on, where their provider wants them to go. We remind them, have a conversation with your provider. Don't go AWOL on your provider. Yep.
Okay, I'll hold my question in the interest of time because I know we have one more presentation, so. Okay, thank you. Great job.
So we'll finish with information technology.
Okay. Hello, Commissioners. Mark Pfaffinger, Sports Services Director and CIO. So I'll be covering the IT metrics today. Also, thanks to my team. You can see how passionate they are about the areas they serve, so I'm lucky to work with such a great group. As far as cybersecurity, why don't we start with the bottom right? I think that's the unique visitors to Larimer County or Larimer's website. You will see a little bit of the COVID effect here. We had a massive increase in connections or unique visitors to our website during the pandemic. Sort of the good news is, even though it has tapered off, we're still very high. So I think we're providing good services through our web. We're providing good data. Still, I would have expected 22 to actually drop farther than it did. So we're seeing similar numbers this year also. So the trend and use of our government technology is still remaining fairly high. We track the business downtime due to technology infrastructure. Our goal is to keep that as close to zero as possible. We had a couple outages last year that added up to about 6 hours. With that, it's kind of a complex measure. If one department's out, we do measure that percentage of that department's outage in relation to the whole county. And so occasionally we will have a software that's provided by a vendor that has an outage. We still collect those hours and try to total them up. So in all, the impact as a ratio to the county was about 6 hours of total downtime. So a good example is we had like an hour outage of Zoom phone on one morning after, a couple months after going live. That would have been counted as 1 hour because we had significant outages for the majority of the county. Maybe not all services were out, but enough to degrade the service where we count that as an outage. This becomes a little more complicated. More and more, we're relying on outside vendors to provide services to the county. And so picking and managing and keeping good relationships with our vendors is a strategy we try to employ, as well as trying to focus on our replacement schedules and do those in a timely manner. So we're not replacing so early that we're replacing before a useful end of life, but not so long that we're starting to see failures in our technology. And so that's always a bit of a juggling act to try to find the perfect time to replace a very expensive network piece of equipment or file server. And I think we're doing a pretty good job. Obviously, we want to keep an eye on these numbers. Impact to downtime is direct impact to our residents, and so this is something we take pretty seriously, and we try to look at ways to resolve that. The last rating is cybersecurity. This is a rating that we've been measuring for a while. It's a credit card score. We're actually looking for a replacement for this measure. The company that provides these scores kept increasing their prices for getting the score to the point where it really wasn't adding enough value to our cyber program. And so we're currently evaluating some new metrics. The one I do kind of like the fish rate, click-through rate. We're looking at that as a measure. That has to do with how many percentage of employees that fall for the phishing emails that we send out, that click on something they shouldn't. That rate is something that directly shows how well our employees are being trained, how are they taking responsibility. And those measures are a little tricky because we keep cranking up the complexity of those scores. We keep making it harder. And so the tool we have allows us to make it, really tricky for employees. So we keep adding complexity to our phishing campaigns, and we keep measuring our click-through rate. So we'll probably be replacing this because the cyber program is getting very complicated. There's a lot of technology we're managing, a lot of threats that are emerging in the government space, especially in public sector, especially in the public safety area. And so that's one of the reasons why we're also looking to add a position here potentially to increase the monitoring of our cyber program. So, I think we're out of time, so I'll leave it there. If there's any important questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Colleagues, I'm just on our staff's time too today. I thought maybe if we had other questions, we can hold off and ask them later. And Mark, I'm assuming with the AI discussion and part of the strategic plan, that's kind of related to some of this as well. And so curious, maybe that might be a question I have for parking lot for later. So anyway, this has been really helpful. Obviously, lots of great news, especially in our complex systems and lots of outside factors that we are navigating. And I appreciate the whole team. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Lorenda and Lori, and everyone in the room. You all have been just phenomenal, and these measures show that. And thank you to all your teams and the people that work in your offices, because they are part of this effort, and we just really grateful for all the work that you do to help us be efficient and be good stewards of taxpayer money and making sure we're providing services at the best way possible and lean, efficient ways and being good stewards. So colleagues, did you want to add any comments to that as well? Okay, so at 12:02, we thank you all and have a great day. We are adjourned.